Well, hey there, everyone. Doggin Days here, and today we're going to be doing a reflections, recap, analysis video specifically focused on one Heroscape tournament that I attended in 2025. This is the first Heroscape tournament that I attended this year, and this is going to be kind of in the vein of that giant scripted video I did for all of the tournaments I attended in 2023, but instead of scripted, it's going to be free-flowing, off the cuff, and instead of a whole bunch of tournaments, it is just going to be going real nitty-gritty in-depth into a single event that I attended. So going to be going over the event itself, what the rules were. I'll be going over the army that I selected, the theorycrafting behind that army, and all the different units that I kind of, was contemplating and then, eliminated from consideration until I narrowed down the army that I did want to bring. And then I'll be going over the games that I played, the armies I faced, mistakes I made, lessons I learned, and things I discovered about Heroscape in general. Because every time you play Heroscape, it's such a rich and deep game, you learn more things about it. So the pictures you're seeing here, these are not my pictures. I can't take credit for these. These are pictures taken by attendees at this tournament, and they posted it in our group. And so, you can see a fallen Braxis there, a bunch of water elementals, an iron golem, all kinds of stuff. And you can see some of the new swamp terrain here, which we had a shipment of that available, and we put that into the tournament. So yeah, that's the idea for this event. This video covering an event. Yeah, we'll dive right into it. I have this organized as a PowerPoint. That probably sounds incredibly boring, but I hope to make it as interesting and informative as I can. But the PowerPoint just spoke to me as a way to cover this, make a slide, the intro slide, and then we'll go down, a bunch of slides on theory crafting, and then slides using the pictures I took at the event. And to be sure, there is no actual live footage of games that I'm going to show on this event. That's kind of, there's been some user requests not to do that, not that people would object to it, but the sort of idea that those take a very long time, and I don't want this video to go too long. I don't want me to talk for an hour and then 4 hours worth of Heroscape games. So I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible. Concise, in quotations. If you see the other content I do on this channel, concise is not necessarily an adjective that describes this channel. But in any case, I'm about to ramble. Let's dive in. You'll hopefully see what what my vision for these videos are, and yeah, if you like this type of video, if you like this type of content in general, of course, do let me know, and we can explore making future installments going forward. So yes, let's dive right in to the event that was being held on February 22nd, so about a week ago. This was a Rainbow Wars event. This is a type of format I had never played before, so it was really great to have an opportunity to play it. So the idea is that it's you have to have 55 points from at least 5 different generals put into your army. So the unit pool, Classic Heroscape, D&D Heroscape, the Renegade units, and this is excluding Marvel, Valhalla Customs. Unfortunately, there's a group of people in our group that seem to be a little iffy on Valhalla Customs, and I can understand where they're coming from, but I'm a big advocate of VC, and so it was sad to see not being available for this event, but that's okay. Hey, changes things up. And then also excluded were the February Age of Annihilation releases. So that would include Ordo Borealis, Halusha, all of those that were released, not able to be used. It was interesting. I believe the determining factor of when we can use those units is when they show up on Heroscape.org, the Chris Perkins site. And it was funny, I believe they appeared on Heroscape.org 1 or 2 days after we held this event. So we were just on the tail end of Heroscape before they were, inducted into kind of the competitive scene. So, but in any case, they were not allowed at this event. It was 520 points in Delta. So that's usually the standard is, around 450, 500. So 520, that's a good amount of points to play with and to draft. And then, of course, in Delta to keep things interesting so that, all those meta armies aren't the only things people bring to the event. Figure limit was only 18 figures, no common squad limit, and of course Delta kind of helps out with that, so no big deal there. And as I said, the special rules are the armies must include at least 55 points from at least 5 different Valkyrie generals. So you can see here I put all the Valkyrie emblems. Right here is Volorak. I included it there because, it it fills out the space of this slide nicely. But technically, there were no Volorak units that could be selected. Tuck Harrigan and the Glide Strikers, they would not be released until April. So, but anyway, I thought I would include it there because there will eventually be a day when you can bring in Volorak. So there's that. I should also say too, I apologize for the poor acoustics and poor audio. I have been in the process of a pretty sizable move. I'm on the tail end of it. Most everything has been moved, but I don't have a proper setup quite yet at my new place. But there was a bit of urgency to get this out now while I still had the events of this tournament fresh in my head. So I hope you can forgive me on that. And yeah, we'll dive into the rest of it. So yeah, but that's the format. That's Rainbow Wars. And yes, I wanted to make a slide about what I consider to be, I thought about it, like, do I have a methodology? Do I have sort of like a way that I pick my armies? Is there any kind of process that I go through? And I did eventually realize, yeah, there's like kind of five points or 5 elements, general elements that go into how I design a tournament army. Now, to be sure, I've not gotten to any of the big tournaments like Gen Con or Scape Con, though I want to. It's just been a matter of carving out the time in the schedule and making the flights out and all that. That's in the future, but it has not happened. My competitive experience in Heroscape has been purely local events. So I say here, casual tournament. Now, I know casual in some circles might be a pejorative. I don't mean it in that way here. I mean it just sort of like, the more laid-back local scenes where, yes, it's competitive. Yes, you're bringing your A game, but, it's not like the grand world championship. The stakes aren't astronomically high. You might win a little cash, you might win a promo figure. So, yeah, I'm calling it casual tournament. You could say local tournament, kind of laid-back tournament, whatever terminology you want to use, but the reason I say that is because these 5 points of how I design, armies that I bring to competitive events probably wouldn't apply as much if I was going to like Gen Con, if I was going to the World Championship, a man can dream. But if I was lucky enough to go to one of those events, I would probably be like, what are the best units I can bring? What's the army I'm most comfortable with? This is just purely like my philosophy for these local events. So anyway, all that out of the way, let's go ahead. There is a particular order to these 5 points. So we're going to start with number 5, but it's going to go down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I had to do it descending. That's the only way the Google Slides wanted to cooperate with it on that. So anyway, number 5, this is the least important, but it's still relevant, is recency. Have I played this army or a variant of it recently, aka the past 2 or 3 events? How recently have I played this army? I say this is the lowest of the 5 points because, frankly, if 2 events happen in a row and the same army or a variant of that army is still good into that event, there's a world in which I would probably bring, that same army again. It might be annoying, but hey, if it's a good fit for 2 different formats in a row, then I may bring it. But I do try to switch it up. I generally try, I like the bees, I like Torkoal and the Grubs. I try not to do that at every single event I go to. So yeah, I try to think, hey, this army, did I run it in the past 2 or 3 events? If so, let's try to find something a bit more, a bit fresher that I haven't tried before. So that's recency. Then the next most important is creativity. So it's kind of dovetailing off of that. How unusual or unexpected do I think this army will be? Does it have interesting synergies or units that don't see as much competitive play? Do I think it'll be different from what other people bring? So that's another thing too, is do I think this will be a creative army? If it's I can't, if it's a melee only event, I brought Firestorm last time, which is, it was fun to run that one time, but it was pretty meta for melee only. And I would imagine, Warriors of Ashra, pretty meta. Martin Hounds, pretty meta. So if I was going into an event like that, I would try to think, like, what are some armies that I think most people would think of as strong for this format? Then what can I do to put a spin on that? How can I make them a little bit more interesting, or how can I kind of throw people for a whirl when I bring in something and they're like, what? You're bringing that? I enjoy that. Again, it's number 4 on the list. It's not the most important thing, but I do try to get creative, and I do try to bring units, and Delta helps with this, with the repricing. But I do try to bring units that people don't see a lot of, that's the idea behind the creativity. Number 3, now we're getting to kind of the more important stuff of these 5 points, is the fun factor. Is this an army I know or think I'll enjoy playing? So like Torkola Grubs, I know I'm going to enjoy playing that. Bees, I know I'm going to enjoy playing that. And there's a couple other armies, you know. I don't want to give away too much because I want to eventually one day talk about those pet armies of mine, but there's lots of armies in Heroscape that I just know I'm going to have fun playing. And sometimes, if it's an army I haven't even played before, but I just have a feeling like, I think this is going to be fun. I think this is going to be fun, and maybe it's not the most meta thing I could bring, but it's going to be a good time. Now, of course, it's Heroscape. Pretty much anything you play is going to be fun except for 4th Massachusetts line. I'll die on that hill. I don't enjoy playing 4th Mass. I just don't. But pretty much anything else is fun. But there are some armies that are more fun than others, and a lot of times those fun armies are the ones that are the least expected. And part of that fun is seeing people's expressions. Like, you brought that to a tournament? So, anyway, fun factor is important. Then now we're getting up to the more serious stuff. So, obviously, number 2, meta strength. It's important. Will it perform well? What armies am I likely to face, and how well can it handle them? What maps will show, and how well does it play on those maps? Am I confident it'll get me to top 3 at an event? So the reason I say top 3, and again, I have had a tournament. It wasn't in 2023, it was in 2024. I had a tournament where I came in last place. I just picked a bad army for the format. Partly because I thought, it'd be a creative army. It'd be a fun army. Yeah, well, it didn't do well. I came in last place. So it is important to me that I pick an army that I think will do well. But I say, when I say the top 3 at an event, whatever place I end up at an event, I'm just happy to play Heroscape with like-minded people. So every day is a blessing when I get to play this game. But if I'm going to a competitive event, I do want to try to get at least top 3. If you try to get first place every event, if your goal is first place at every single event, you're going to drive yourself crazy. There's so many variables that go into Heroscape. Dice rolling, maps, matchups. There's so many things that are beyond your control that I feel like top 3 is a reasonable goal to try to get to. Or, if we're doing a round robin format, get to the playoffs. Maybe not top 3, but at least you made the playoffs. Those are reasonable goals for me. I don't always hit them, but I try. So yeah, meta strength is it's important. It's the second most important of these 5 points. Is this army going to do well? So like you could bring a creative army, but it probably is not going to do well. And so I weight the meta strength more heavily than creativity. Like, I one time it was a General Wars format after I had that event with the bees. There was another General Wars format in 2024, and I thought, you know what, screw it, I'm going to do bees again. It's all Aquila, I know this army well, and I'm going to do it. And I thought it'd be good into that event. It's not really creative, but I thought it was strong, right? So meta strength is weighted more heavily in this list. Then finally, the most important out of everything, vibes. Am I just feeling the army? Does it just click? This is often a combination of all these other points, and it's usually the deciding factor. So yes, it's the loosest of these 5 terms, but it's also the most important. There's a certain moment whenever you're building an army, at least this has been my experience, when you're building an army, you just so many people I've talked to can attest to this. You just lay down in bed, or you're on your weekend, or you're at a break at work, and you're just like, all these different armies. You're scrolling through the Chris Perkins Heroscape.org website, and you come up with all these different armies. No, that doesn't work. This works. Maybe try this. You spend all that time theory crafting and brainstorming your army, and then eventually you kind of settle on one, and you're like, that's it. I'm feeling it. And sometimes it's sort of like, I don't even know if this will be good. I just want to run it. That's that mysterious vibes. Whatever that mysterious it factor is, sometimes the army just has it, and you're like, this is weird, this is unexpected, I think it's going to be fun, it's creative, it's not something I've played recently, and it might be strong, screw it. All those ingredients combine into just strong vibes for an army. At a certain point, you just say, we're doing it, stamp, final decision, that's my army. So anyway, that's, again, a long-winded rant of the 5 different elements that go into building armies for me. Can maybe these numbers fluctuate here and there, but that's kind of the rough order I have them in. And again, if it was something like a Gen Con or the World Championship, this all would change. But for, fun, laid-back local events, this is kind of how I go about it. Okay. All right, now we get into the theory crafting. So I got a whole bunch of slides about this. And right off the bat, thinking about a format in which you have to bring units from 5 different generals one of the first armies that jumped out and came to mind, and I settled on this pretty early in the theory crafting process, was the good old Kurok and his elementals. So as you can see here, Kurok he's if anyone's familiar with the army, unfamiliar with the army, Kurok is a wizard, and he glues all of these elementals together. The elementals are pretty powerful. I like them, but if you lose Kurok, the whole army is decapitated, and you're in a lot of trouble. But it's a fun army, and as you can see here, Kurok follows Utgar, and so you have an elemental that follows Utgar here, but then you have an elemental that follows Jandar, Einar, and Aquila. So just from this roster of units, if you were to build your army out of, you could leave out the fire elemental and take Kurok, the air, earth, and water elementals, and you've knocked out 4 out of the 5 generals you need for to meet the requirements for the event. So that I pretty early settled on it. I think I was also thinking about wormlings as an army, because those are 4 different wormlings, 4 different generals. They all bond with each other. That seemed really cool. But one of the reasons I think I don't have as many wormlings. I could 3D print them, of course, but it was a bit more of a hassle. 2, I just wormlings, they are maximum 2 activations per turn. Now, if you have something like a white wormling, that's potentially 4 attacks per turn, which is not bad. But I just like the consistency of, with Kurok, you can activate 3 elementals per turn. And the elementals are pretty good, air elemental is the squishiest, but he's also the fastest, and he's got his swirling vortex, which is excellent. But you see 4/4, 3/4 with 5 range, 4/4. Elementals are, even though they're 1 life for common heroes, they're pretty tough. So activating 3 of them in 1 turn, it's not bad, especially at Delta points, because Delta does a lot to make these guys more attractive. So anyway, I pretty early settled on Kurok plus some core of elementals. So we'll go into the theory crafting behind which elementals I selected. Yes, but first we'll go over this. So theory crafting, support and filler units. So a very busy screen, I understand, but these are all of the units that I had at one point or another thought about speccing into this army to support Kurok. So going back up here, if you lose Kurok, this really is the rule of the army. If you lose Kurok too early, that's your enemy's win condition. This is different from, I've heard some people say, when I first started Heroscape, I thought, king armies, that's Torkulna, Nilfheim, Greenscales, Nagrebs, and I thought, that's also Kurok, because if you lose Kurok, your game's over. Well, true, it's the same idea. You want to protect Kurok, you want to protect Torkulna, you want to protect Nilfheim, but Kurok, he is not responsible. The key distinction here is Kurok is not responsible for the majority of your offense. He's only got 3 attack. He's not doing the majority of the attacking. It's his elementals. So this is where Kurok, he's equally important to the kings, but he's a commander. This is a commander army where you have to protect the commander who, he's the command base for all of these guys. He provides the logistics to make this army work. So that's the difference there. But with that in mind, understanding that Kurok is extremely important to protect and quite a bit squishier than some of the kings we talked about, Nilfheim, Torkulna, they'll take a heck of a lot more punishment than Kurok will. A couple good melee, attacks, a couple good range shots, which really is his biggest weakness. Someone snipes him away from range, he's toast. He's only got 3 life, or 5 life, 3 defense. Not much better, but he's squishy. He can die fast, so it's really important to protect him. And so I was thinking of all these different ways that I could protect him. Some of the obvious ones were the different versions of original Raylin. So Raylin from Rise of the Valkyrie, one of, if not the strongest unit in the game. She's up to, I think, 140 in Delta. And I should also say, too, this is the Delta pricing at the tail end of February 2025. So at that time, if memory serves, she was up to 140 points. And honestly, it's deserved. She is outstanding. She adds +2 to defense of anything. So I thought, making Kurok 5 life, 5 defense, he's going to be tough to bring down. And she'll also provide the aura to a bunch of elementals. So it'll be easier to protect them, and it'll be harder for the enemy to take them down. But the problem with Raylin is, aside from the enormous price tag, is that her aura affects a fairly small area. I mean, it's good. It's very good, but Kurok, his is an army that I have found you can't just cloister everything around that 4 space aura. You do need to spread out to start, being aggressive into the opponent and to build up kind of a wall between you and the opponent to keep them from getting too close to Kurok. So I thought Raylan would be challenging to fit in there, although I spent a lot of time trying to find a way to fit her in. And the other thing too is with that high price tag, that's that many points you can't put into your foot soldiers, your elementals. And it's a huge amount of points put into the General of Jandar, which means how many air elementals am I going to be able to fit in? Now, I should say at this early stage of theory crafting, my general idea for the army was the core, the thrust of the army would be earth elementals and water elementals. Earth would be just kind of my grunt foot soldiers, 4 attack is pretty solid, and then the water elementals would be range, so not great range, 5 range, but at least it can threaten beyond a certain position. And then I thought maybe 1 or 2 air elementals, not many, but just 1 or 2 air elementals for the occasional interdiction. Just fly an air elemental, if an opponent is charging for Torkulna, if an opponent is charging for Kurok, throw an air elemental in his way, lock him down, and stop him with the swirling vortex. So I thought that's the approach. Mostly water, mostly earth, maybe a fire if I had room for filler. But anyway, so I thought, well, if you have Raylan and then 1 air elemental, that's 170 points, possibly 200 points if you have 2 air elementals. So then it became really difficult to fit in points for the other generals needed to fit the format. That's when I started thinking about new Raylan, or newer Raylan. There's now 4 incarnations of her, but Swarm of the Morrow Raylan. This was a bit more attractive because she's down to 100 in Delta, and her aura extends farther, 6 spaces. It's 1 less defense, but still, every dice counts, and it's a little extra armor to protect you. And Whirlwind Assault, she's not bad in the end game, so that was kind of attractive. But again, the same problem I was running into, all those points being put into Jandar. I had to think about, I have to make sure my roster is diversified across 5 different generals, and I wanted at least 1 air elemental in there. And so, yeah, at a certain point, I kind of got off the Raylan track here, although I did spend a lot of time thinking about ways to fit her in. Next up, you can see here some of the Age of Annihilation units, specifically the 3 Aquila figures from the battle box, specifically focusing on Awashia. So if you've opened the battle box, if you've played with it, you know that Awashia has an ability where she can plop down water spaces across the board. And the thinking was those water spaces, Awashia can set up a perch, a pod on height, where she deposits a couple different water spaces, and those are places that my water elementals can jump onto, and then they're putting, if it's on height, they get height, the water bonus, and they're dropping ranged at 3 attacks of 5 at 5 range, which I thought would be pretty strong, pretty, and they're also at 5 defense, 6 defense on height if they're sitting on water. So I thought Awashia would be an interesting pairing for them. Plus, Awashia, too. This is the other thing I was thinking about. This army is, elementals are fun, and they can be good. But if you lose Kurok, before the end game, if you put all of your points into elementals and Kurok dies, all you have left over are elementals, and how good are they in the end game? I liked the idea, and when I was thinking about her, I liked the idea of Awashia in there as a powerful ranged fate, because you got her twister attack, 6 range, 4 attack. That's pretty good. She has to be within space of water, but still very good. I thought she would be a good end game janitor if it came down to it. If I lost Kurok early, but the enemy was just a couple scattered squad figures, reasonable confidence Awashia could mop them up. But again, running into the problem of, and I should say too, the reason I had these two her 2 familiars up here was because it'd be cool if I drafted Awashia. I'd like to be able to take a turn with Kita or Anshu, or maybe both. Anshu's great for her. Anyway, it's flight and then the sonic blast. That's really fun. That's a fun ability. I was actually kind of leaning, if I was going to pick a familiar, I was leaning towards Kita, because Kita would be a good glyph grabber because of the apparition abilities. 6 move, and I'm kind of surprised by this. 4 defense. For some reason in my head, I don't play much with Kita, but for some reason in my head I thought 3 defense, and then I saw 4 defense. I thought, it's not bad. That's not bad for only 30 points. 2 lives. And then the apparition, which gives her, I think it's a her, yes. It gives her some anti-range defense. So I thought, while I'm spending turns setting up with Awashia, I could be moving Kita out to go grab an important glyph. And so it was an interesting theory, but I didn't end up going with it. 1, because I just imagine that's a lot of turns you have to spend setting up this one pod. Iwashi is not terribly fast. She doesn't have flight. She 5 move. It's going to take her a little while to climb up onto that ideal perch. And then, it's, I think, once every turn, 3 on this card, at the end of Iwashi's turn. So you need 3 turns to set up those 3 different water spaces. It's a whole round you just have to spend on Iwashia setting up that perch. So I just thought it's not a very efficient use of the order markers. And the other problem was, similar to Raylin, it's a lot of points put into Aquila. And I want to have a decent contingent of water elementals who are also from Aquila. So it was challenging to fit, a familiar, Iwashia, and all my water elementals. That's a lot of, I feel like I'm maxed out on Aquila at that point, and then I still don't have much points left over to build up the rest of my elemental force. And I still need a 5th general in there, So, I even contemplated an army where I didn't bring along a familiar, just Iwashia and then a bunch of water elementals. But again, I didn't like the idea of spending points on Iwashia. I think she's down in Delta, but I didn't like the idea of spending any points on her if I wasn't going to get that familiar. It just feels like why abandon that free activation if I. So anyway, I decided this wasn't an efficient use of points, and I knocked Iwashia out of consideration. These are some fun ones here. We can talk about Tauren. I did briefly contemplate Tauren because Tauren offers his Evil Eye protection for any figures that small and medium figures that follow Utgar, and the idea I had in mind was Kurok. So Kurok has 3 defense. Tauren, if Kurok is next to Tauren, if someone attempts to shoot Kurok, let's say they blank, and then Kurok rolls 1 defense. He gets Tauren's Evil Eye protection and gets a 1 defense counter strike into the attacking figure. So I thought that would be a cool deterrent psychologically for someone. Even though it's not hard to get through 3 defense, what if you blank? What if you're a 1 life squad figure shooting at Kurok from afar and you blank? And the fear of blanking and the fear of that counter strike, range counter strike, I thought would be effective, or at least there was some utility there to be had. But the problem with it is, Tauren, I think he goes down to 80. He's not 120 in Delta, but Tauren, this Evil Eye protection only applies to normal attacks. So if someone brought in Q10, they could just machine pistol Kurok to death or wrist rocket him to death, and he doesn't care about Evil Eye protection. So I thought that's a lot of points for kind of niche fun strategy that can be easily bypassed by a certain type of attacker. Tauren is a unit that I feel like everyone has this. Everyone has a unit in Heroscape where they're like, I want to make this work. I feel like this unit is better than people are giving him credit for, and I want to make this work. Tauren is one of those units for me. Like, Battle Axe is really cool. He gets to make 6 attack against small and medium figures. It's not bad, and he's got pretty decent stats, and Evil Eye is just a lot of fun. I've played casual games with friends, where Tauren is the end figure on the opponent's team, and Tauren just cleans house. I mean, just in the end game, he's pretty frightening. But for this format and for the points that he demanded, and the fact also he's Utgar, another, support unit from a general I already have checked off from my elemental build here, it just didn't make sense. So got rid of Kurok pretty quickly. Then another one I was lingering on for a while was the Nikita agents, and I thought a pretty long time about making the Nikitas a part of this army, specifically for their smoke powder. So the idea is if, a Nikita agent is adjacent to a figure and that a figure is attacked by a non-adjacent figure for a normal attack, you can roll a d20. If you roll a 13 or higher, none of the figures adjacent to any Nikita agent on the board can be targeted. They're just automatically immune from range, period, that turn, from normal ranged attacks. 13 or higher, it happens more often than you think, and I thought it would be really cool to have one of them right next to Kurok and maybe 1 or 2 of them next to a couple of elementals out on the board. And then people try to go for Kurok, and it's just, oh yeah, sorry, you can't attack him. Nope, 13 or higher. And then the person would say, well, if they're shooting for Kurok, I thought, I imagined that they would say, what do I go for? Do I go for Nikita or do I go for Kurok? If they decide to go for the Nikita to get rid of the smoke powder, well, they can do that, but that's 1 extra attack they're not spending on Kurok. So I thought even that had utility. Just 1 attack diverting a range attack away from Kurok, I thought that'd be great. Plus the Nikita's 6 range, 3 attack. not bad. So like as I'm they could be an end game cleanup force. I could get some early attacks off on range as the enemy is developing, as I'm setting them up to set up their smoke powder. It was a cool idea, and this had the bonus. I think they're down to 105, or they were down to 105 at the time of the tournament. But the Nikitas had the bonus of coming from Vidar. So Vidar plus 4 generals right here. That would have cleared it. That would have been all the generals I needed for this event. Now, of course, you don't get all of the points that go into the Nikitas, because if I was to draft them, because Guerrillinator movement bonding, you don't have any Guerrillinators in the army. But I still thought Smoke Powder plus Engagement Strike, which is really cool. If a Nikita bodyguard was next to Kurok, and a melee unit was trying to go for Kurok, and they ended up engaging the Nikita, they roll a 15 or higher, you get an extra wound on that. I thought there was a lot of appealing reasons to bring the Nikitas to this event. But there were a couple others that I did want to talk about in my theory crafting. So the Krav Maga agents, they're just superior to the Nikitas pretty much in every way. They have 1 extra move, 1 extra range, and they have their stealth dodge, which is far superior to Smoke Powder. The reason I like the Krav is it fills out the Vidar unit that I'll need for my 5 generals. But also, they just synergize so well with any of the Raylins. So at the time I was contemplating the Raylins, I thought, well, naturally include the Krav Maga. Boom, there you go. 1 or 2 extra defense with stealth dodge, that's great. But again, once I thought, don't do either of the Raylins, then I thought, maybe forget about the Krav Maga, because they're at 125 points. I thought, if I need a 3-figure range squad to support Kurok, let's go with the Nikitas, because they have Smoke Powder, and they have comparable, if not equal stats to the Krav Maga. So that was my thinking there. And then these 2 are the ones of course, Demutif, of course, just as a filler unit. I should also say too, Sahuagin should go in here at some point, the Sahuagin Raider from D&Dscape, because in Delta he's down to 10 points. Now 25 points, that's a big ask for the Sahuagin Raider. I'm a big fan of Sahuagin at 10 points or less. I really am. I think he competes with Otanashi for that role, but not Ball. If it's a VC unit, forget it. He's completely outclassed by Ball for a 10-point figure. Absolutely no question. But in a non-VC event like this one, if he had 10 points left over, Sahuagin Raider, I thought was an attractive pick. He's got that blood frenzy. So yeah, he's not on here. He was just so negligible, I didn't include them, and I didn't have the real estate on this page to include one other card. But yeah, Demutif Guard I had thought about as a filler. But these 2 are the kind of the interesting ones here. So now we're getting to the stage. Oh, I completely glossed over Mika. That's how much time I spent thinking about here. But I imagined a situation where I could put I could have Mika set up a shadow space, and then Kurok could stand on that shadow space, and he just stays put, and he gets 4 defense. So that's kind of a cheaper. I think she's down to like 80 or something. I think she's maybe 60. She's way down in Delta because she's not that good, not for 110 points. But if you get her at a discount, it started getting a little interesting. She's got her Shadow Dance too, so in the right setup, she could drop 6 attack, which is great. Or Shadow Ambush, I'd say. Shadow Dance is cool on shadow maps, But the problem with Mika is you spend a turn, you have to spend a whole order marker plopping down a shadow tile. Then you have to spend a whole another order marker moving her off of it. Even if you get Kurok onto that shadow tile, let's say for some reason you had to move Kurok, maybe to get him away from an attacker, or extend his aura in a different direction, that shadow tile is still there. And something I've learned about Mika, when you place a shadow tile, your opponent can use it too. So if you put a shadow tile amid a cluster of your own forces, and an enemy infiltrator gets in there, well, he can grab that shadow tile, and he's now you have a buffed up enemy unit that's in your back line, attacking you. So Mika I've found could be actually kind of a hindrance, plays like that. But it still was interesting to me as a budget Raylin option to buff up Kurok's defense. I also thought of her as a way to buff up this pod I was imagining of Awashia. So Awashia gets her Aegis of the River, so she could maybe stand on a water tile on a perch, but I thought, no, she should drop all 3 of those water tiles for 3 water elementals. So I thought, if this is like really theoretical, really experimental, but Mika could have jumped up on top of a perch, placed a shadow tile, run off it, and then Awashia would land on that shadow tile, and then the 3 water tiles she places around that shadow tile would be for the water elementals. Just speaking that, just verbalizing those words, those thoughts, it's a lot of effort, right? That would have been a ton of effort to put up just a kind of a goofy, a cool. It would have been cool if it was possible, but no, it was order marker inefficient, would take way too long, and I just thought, no, don't do it. So yeah, I didn't spend long thinking about Mika, but I did want to include her because there was a period where I was contemplating her. But anyway, now let's get into these guys here. Agent Carr versus X-17. A reason I liked X-17, both of these, as you can see, are Vidar. So right now I'm pretty married to the idea of Vidar is going to be the 5th general in my army. But now, what does Vidar have in Delta that I can spec into this army? So I kind of narrowed it down to, of course, the Nikitas. I haven't fully gotten rid of them yet, but I narrowed it down here pretty much to Agent Carr and X-17. And let's start with X-17 because I liked his Cyberclaw, which is great, and his melee defense 4. The idea would be, as you know, if a dangerous opponent is approaching me, I would keep an order marker on X-17, drop that order marker, fire X-17 out, and just lock that opponent in place. So that opponent might get maybe 2 hexes within striking distance of Karak, melee opponents, of course. Might get really close to Karak, but X-17 just locks them down and says, no, you have to deal with me. And I liked him as like the chief bodyguard of Karak. Even to like a ranged unit, you know, if a major showed up, the majors are large. Well, if Major X-17 grabbed them and said, no, you have to shoot through me, and again, you know, special attacks don't trigger melee defense 4, but even a ranged normal attacker, it'd be great for X-17 to grab him. And X-17 would drop 4 attack, that's respectable. And, you know, and anyone who's locked down by him, if they don't have a special attack, they're going to have to sit there churning through 5 life, 7 defense. So I thought it was a really appealing pick, X-17, for that. But then I also thought about good old Agent Carr, our man Agent Carr. And the reason for it, pretty obviously, is his 6 attack. And specifically, his 6 attack for his Delta discount. He is 70 points in Delta. That's a pretty cheap beat stick you have with Sword of Reckoning. I'd pay 70 points for Carr, you know. He doesn't synergize with anything. You have to spend a whole order marker on him. But one reason this was really attractive was, think about it, right? So, you know, the highest attack you're getting out of any of these base before any buffs is 4. You know, 4 out of the fire, 4 out of the earth. And 4 if the water elemental is on water. So, you know, I probably have a lot of bodies on the ground, but they're not hitting especially hard. So that might work in many armies, you know, where there's not really high defense. But what if I ran into an army that had a major? What if there was a Deathwalker? They can show up in Delta, you know. I've seen some Zedian infantry builds in Delta. But what if something like that showed up and I needed a can opener? Well, I thought Carr would have utility for that in those scenarios. Just have him in the background, just have him in the toolkit, you know. If I end up going up against an army that has a high defense unit like that, bring out Carr and smash him, you know. Plus, Carr has 6 range too, so even as he's moving up, as you're setting him in position, he can still threaten, so you can take a little plink shot. Anyway, so I thought, yeah, I eventually got to a point where I was narrowing down between Carr and X-17, and if I remember correctly, yes. And we'll get back to these guys, but remember that at this stage I've more or less eliminated all these others, and I was focused on these 2 guys right here. So now we'll talk about the elementals that I had physically available, and then the first draft of the army. You can see the Nikita agents are there along with the Sahuagin Raider. That was the first draft, but it did not stay that way for very long. So now, you know, we have all of these filler units in mind. They're circulating in my head over which one of these I'm going to use. But I think more important, it was to decide what the configuration of elementals with Karak was going to be. I was pretty set on this army, so now I had to figure out which elementals I'd be bringing. Now, I spent a lot of time theory crafting and not a lot of time preparing 3D printing, or maybe, you know, grabbing 3D prints online or finding cheap ways to get a hold of all the elementals that I wanted to play with. So right here, you can see these are the elementals I had physically available with me at, you know, a couple days ahead of the tournament, you know. So I had 5 air elementals, 4 earth elementals, 11 fire elementals, and I say that here, that's because I ran Firestorm at one point, and then 3 water elementals. So the initial version, the first draft version of the army that I had wanted to run would be 5 earth elementals and 4 water elementals. The idea being, I'd like to be able to say I have like a squad of earth elementals. So 3 earth elementals, that's essentially a ranged squad, right? I'd like to be able to have at least 3, and then 1 extra for insurance if one of them dies. And then I imagine just the earth elementals, they're the grunts, they're the infantry, they're going to go in and do the brawling and the beatdowns and stuff. 4 defense, 4 attack, pretty solid. I thought 5 of them would be sufficient for that. And then, like I said, air elementals, just 2 of them, not many, just a couple of them for the occasional interdiction, like I said. So yeah, I had 11 fire elementals, could maybe use 1 or 2 for filler, but not what I was going to. I'm not going to make fire elementals the core because Kurok put sufficient points into the Utgar faction for this army. I had 3 water elementals, and you'll see this in a second. These are not all official figures. They're a weird mixture of the original D&D figures that were repurposed for Heroscape, 3D prints, and then yes, I have 1 original. I have 2 original air elementals, and then 1 of each of the remaining figures because they're freaking expensive, man. But yeah, like I say here, I wanted my core to be earth and water heavy for offense, 1 or 2 airs for interdiction. And so this is the army I settled on. And at the time, I was thinking, oh yeah, Nikita agents, they fit pretty nicely into that. 520 points, 16 figures. I got, boom, all my generals, and then Sahuagin Raider for filler. It seemed like a good army. And so I asked my friend Alex to do some 3D printing. I said, hey man, I've got 2 or 3 days left. Here are the STL files. Do you think you could get me? I'm missing 1 earth elemental and 1 water elemental. And I thought maybe I'd play around with this further. Could you get me 2 or 3 earth elementals and water elementals? I'll buy you dinner at some time or whatever, something like that, And initially, it sounded like it was going to happen. But at a certain point, Alex told me that he just was busy or he wasn't able to fit into his schedule because 3D printing takes a long time, right? So there were only like 2 days, with 2 days left, I learned the news that, sorry, Will, I can't print you these figures. So I thought, oh no, like this ideal elemental army that I was imagining, I'm not going to be able to run it. I have to figure something out. And so it just sent me, I had to just go back to the drawing board, and it just sent me down. I had to rethink everything. I've got all of these elementals here. Like, what on earth could I do? And I actually have footage of, I recorded myself of on that night where I was thinking, how am I going to rebuild my army? I do actually have footage of that, and I'd like to play it for you now.
That darned Alex ruined everything! How can I 3D print my elementals and build my glorious elemental army if there is no 3D printer? I'm at my limit. I have no choice. Send in the air elemental fleet. Charge!
Yes, indeed. So I decided we're just going to do all the elementals I have other than fire elementals. And that means we're bringing 5 air elementals to this tournament. I've never seen this many elementals on a live board before. I don't even think I've seen them on a virtual board before. So we're not doing any fire elementals because Kurok takes care of our Utgar, but I decided we'll bring all 3 water elementals, all 4 earth elementals, and all 5 air elementals. Is it meta? I don't know. But at this stage, it was like, I've got less than a day to figure this army out. I've got to pick something. Screw it, we're going to do it. What do we got in the box? Let's take these ones out and bring them to the event. So this is where the fun factor and kind of the vibes factor starts kicking in. I was like, this is weird, this is crazy, this is out of left field, but screw it, we're going to do it anyway. So as you can see, that's our configuration. That's the one I settled on. 435 points. That leaves us with 85 points left. And now both of them are 100 in Classic, but in Delta, I believe Car is 70 and Major X17 is 75. So now my question was, we're scrapping the Nikita agents. We're getting rid of them, and we're getting rid of the Sahuagin. So we're getting rid of them. We have our configuration here. What am I going to do about my Vidar filler, if you can call it that? What am I going to do to round out my 5th general? So we returned ourselves to that question of Car versus X17. And I thought on it a bit longer. I thought on it, and I thought on it. One of the things that I didn't realize going into the tournament was that the February Age of Annihilation releases might be showing. I thought they might be showing up. There was a lot of conversation in our Heroscape group that people were talking about bringing Halushia, Scion of the Wild, the Age of Annihilation unit that's just been released. They were thinking about or they say like, this is a really good unit, I'm really impressed with it. And there's just been a lot of chatter about that one unit. And so in my mind, I thought, might I have to face down Halushia? I didn't realize that they'd be banned from this event because they haven't yet been included on, at the time, they hadn't yet been included on Heroscape.org. But in my mind, I was thinking, how would I stop Halusha? If Halusha is charging through my elementals straight for Kurok, how would I stop that? So that's where X17 became, even more attractive. X17 could rush up and grab Halusha and stop him there, and that would be really cool. But in my mind, I thought, that's really the only thing I'm using X17 for, just as a roadblock to stop someone from coming. And could my elementals fulfill that roadblock role well enough? And I thought, yeah, they would. In a lot of the small and medium figures, I'm going to have 5 air elementals. That's a huge roadblock for people coming for Kurok. So at that point, I realized I think Kar is the call here. I thought he offers more. He fills out more of the blind spots of the army. He gives me a nice 6 attack when I need to call upon it. And just for 70 points, Kar is good. Kar is good. So that left me with this final configuration. Why do I have these general symbols on the side? I don't know, because it fills out the space and it looks nice. But anyway, here is the configuration. So with all of the elementals that I selected, we have Kurok, all the elementals, Agent Kar, and then I had 15 points left over. And I was thinking, do I give up 5 points to go for the Sahuagin Raider? I do like Blood Frenzy at 10 points. I said, nah, screw it. I would like to have all my points filled out for this one, so I went with the Demutive Guard, and this was it. This was the army, and this is the army that I would bring to this tournament. Before we get to the tournament itself, how long have I been talking? I shudder to think. But before we get to that, an idea entered my head very last minute, the day, maybe the night before the tournament. And I'm calling this the Sonlin revision, the AOA revision. This is before I fully, internalize or realize that the AOA units, these particular AOA units, would be banned from the tournament. But I do want you to guys, if you're still listening, I want you guys to think about this particular build that I had in mind, because it will offer an interesting comparison to the army I did eventually bring to the event. So Sonlin is a really impressive figure. I've played a couple, casual games with him, but I thought he would be good for this tournament, and specifically for Kurok, because he can move. He's got 6 range, so he outranges everything else in my army. 4 attack, 6 range, very solid, plus Dragon Assault. Now, I was drafting Agent Kar because I liked his offensive power, 6 attack. But Sonlin, even though he doesn't quite reach 6 attack, Dragon Assault, if he flies that turn, he can get 2 attacks. One of them could be 5 attacks. So 5 attack, 4 attack, pretty good. I thought that, if I was bringing Sonlin, I wouldn't need to bring Agent Kar. And Sonlin covers my 5th general base as an Ular unit. Plus he has Healing Wing, so he can fly around a lot, and he could fly over Kurok. So, on one turn, Kurok takes a hit from an opponent. On a turn, I could fly over Kurok, attempt to heal him, and do a lot of offensive damage. I could either shoot at 6 range or Dragon Assault. So Sonlin seemed like an interesting pick, and it was interesting for me when I discovered Kurok, Sonlin, and then 3 of each of the elementals. Wow, it works out perfectly. That and it, 55 points at 5 different generals, perfect. So I should have thought to ask our tournament director before I brought Sonlin to the event. In my mind, I thought, there's a chance this is not going to be allowed, so I'm going to bring my backup army, this army here, which is the army I did eventually bring, But I did bring Sonlin anyway, just in case it was on offer, because I felt pretty strong about Sonlin once I realized this last minute. But anyway, to be sure, this is the army I went with, and so I packed all my stuff, including Sonlin, and went off to the tournament. And so here we can finally talk about the actual games that I played that day. So this was held at Card Addiction in Anaheim, California. Brandon, also known as Blood Gear, the manager, one of the managers at Card Addiction, was kind enough to give me the logo to post here. He's been a fantastic tournament director. He'll spend the night before and he'll just prepare the shop, and it's just so great to just walk in right at 2 o'clock and all the maps are set out. I mean, he's just done a phenomenal job. So I wanted to promote him in my own way and thank him, pay it forward for all the work and labor he put into our events. I think this is the 3rd, maybe 4th Heroscape event, or the 4th Heroscape event he's hosted. I only went to 3 of them, but in any case, great venue, great staff, and so as you can see here, this is the army that I ended up going with. This was taken at the event itself, and this was after they told me, we're not allowing the latest releases of Age of Annihilation just yet. So I'm like, okay, backup army, activate. So you can see here, this is actually kind of a weird hodgepodge of, as I may have shared earlier, I forget. But you can see here, these two, and I'll go ahead and use the laser pointer, yeah. So these two right here, oh, there's a siren. What can you do? Anyway, these are two air elementals. These are official. I don't know why that black mark is there, but that's how I got them. 2 official air elementals, and then you can see here, it's exactly the same sculpt because these are the original D&D figures that were repurposed into Heroscape for the Heroscape version of the air elementals. But for local events, they're still valid. They wouldn't be valid for a Renegade event because that has to be all official. Totally get it. But for these, local events, 3D prints, as long as the sculpt is right, it works. And these guys were super cheap. They were only like $3, so it just made tons of sense. So anyway, I have 5 of those. You can see there's my 5th right there. Then I have 4 of the Earth Elementals. Only one of them is official because official Heroscape is obscenely expensive. Classic official Heroscape. And then here are the D&D versions of them. They're slightly lighter tint than this guy here. And then my 3 Water Elementals. This is the official one right here. This is a 3D print I got from Trexy 3D, a great resource for anyone who wants high quality 3D prints. They've been excellent. This is also a Trexy 3D base. So just a great print I had sitting around. It was actually like a freebie. I bought a haul of 3D prints, and then this one was thrown in. And then I was like, wow, it turns out there's actually an event. I'm going to use this. So I put him on a base, and boom, he was ready to go. And then this is the D&D Water Elemental here. Same sculpt. Everything was fine. And yeah, so those are all of it. And then, of course, Kurok and Agent Carr. And the Demutive Guard. So these are, this was a Swiss tournament style. So those are familiar with how Swiss works in chess. Winners play winners, losers play losers. But then, at the end of a couple rounds, a rough ranking is created for the players based on the strengths of the armies that they face, that sort of thing. 59 minutes, so about an hour, and there were 11 players. So not a huge event, but still a pretty solid turnout for, casual local weekend event. And yes, anyway, great venue, and I was super excited to get into it. So now we could finally talk about all the games that we played that day. There were 4 specifically. So let's dive in. Okay, so game 1 was held on Dark Promise. This is a map by Sir Heroscape, and this is a map made up of shadow, dungeon, lava, and some water and master set parts. There are 2 glyph locations. It's a map I had never played on, but as always, was excited to test it out and see how my army would run. I was heartened to see that there were some water spots on the map in the start zone, and I thought those would be logical places to set up the water elementals to get their buff. Even though the opponent would get height on them, my initial thought was, for your initial placement, definitely put your water elementals on those so that your other elementals can be on the land spaces. So anyway, let's talk about the opponent's army. This army I faced against Aaron, who's been a wonderful opponent in other events that I've been to. So he brought Braxis, 1 squad of Greenscale Warriors, Ninjas of the Northern Wind, Evil Raylin, and Zetacron. So I was just happy to see Braxis show up in a competitive event. Braxis is very good, don't get me wrong. I mean, she goes up in Delta, even if only by 5 points. She is very good, but she's matchup dependent, and oftentimes is just in the shadow of Nilfheim, because Nilfheim is just a lot more consistent and less matchup dependent. So it's just nice to see that Braxis was showing up at a competitive event. I think I've seen her once or twice before at the events that I've been going to, but again, I'm always heartened to see her. And just a beautiful figure, too. Anyway, she had a bodyguard of 1 squad of Greenscales. And yeah, so interesting mix of figures right there. That was my opponent's army. And here is the board itself. So I didn't take a picture of my placement, but you can see it right there. So I'll go ahead and do the laser pointer. It's a bit more fun. I'll talk about my general recollection of how this game played, and we'll do that for the other 3 games to go over in this video. So as you can see here, I put my water elementals in water, and then 1 there, and then my earth. Kurok I put at the start of the line right there, and this is kind of a strategy I learned from the Firestorm tournament. You want Kurok as far, maybe not always. In fact, there is a scenario I'll show later where I didn't put him at the start of my start zone. But in this case here, I thought, if you put him at your start zone, what is the area in which he can activate elementals? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like, it goes up to here. That's a lot. That's a huge area of the board in which he can activate elementals. And even too, if an elemental is sitting right here, he can still activate it and he can still launch it outward. Now that elemental is out of his range, but still, he's firing. His elementals can start no farther from here, and they still have a pretty far threat range. Anyway, so that's why I put him that far forward, because I didn't want to spend a lot of turns moving him. I wanted to move my elementals up to start building up an elemental wall to protect him. But there was a concern here. Do you see it? It's this guy right here, Zetacron. So Zetacron just needs to climb up to 1 level of height here, and he's got 8 range. 8 range, shooting down, he's got deadly shot. If he rolls all 3 skulls and I blank, Karak is cooked. Even if I roll 1 shield, Karak is cooked. So if that were to happen, I'd be in big trouble. And with 8 range, that's pretty good. In other words, with 8 range, it does not take long for Zetacron to get into place to shoot at Karak. This is where I think I actually made an early mistake, and I'll talk about it. So as I was moving up elementals, I was really worried about Zetacron, possibly overly worried. One of the first moves I made in the first round was to move Karak up. Not far, but move him up. I moved him 1, 2, 3. I think right there, so that he wasn't, next to any height. He was just a little bit forward, and that moves his wall of elemental influence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So just a little bit further. So my thinking was, if I could just move Karak up a little bit, then I can play around with my elementals a little bit more and hopefully intercept Zetacron early. But again, that was a mistake, because I did not necessarily need to worry about Zetacron's range for quite a while. Zetacron, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. At that point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At that point, Zetacron was within striking distance, but it would take Zetacron at least 2 turns. And what I should have done is spent all of my turns on air elementals, rush them, or at least I think this is what I should have done. Don't move Karak. Leave him there. Let the opponent come to you. The one advantage of the Karak army is Karak is such an important prize, is such a juicy target. The opponent might psychologically feel like, I have to go for Karak, and you can kind of use that to your advantage. You can kind of coax the opponent towards you, get them into an unfavorable position in pursuit of Karak, and then jump them, So anyway, I put Karak up early. I think it was a mistake because he put Zetacron there, and as soon as I saw Zetacron move up, I think Zetacron ended up moving up here. I thought, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? Because he did take a height shot down onto Karak, and I forget how many skulls he rolled, but he ended up putting 2 wounds on Karak. So I thought, oh my gosh, I just dodged a bullet. So that was really scary. But again, Zetacron is only 1 attack per turn, but my elementals 3 attacks per turn. Eventually what happened is, after Karak survived that harrowing shot, air elementals started moving up. Again, I forget all the details, but it was a mixture of my water elementals stayed back, but it was a mixture of my earth and air elementals moving up and intercepting. I think an earth elemental took out Zetacron. Raylan moved up, I think, right around here. A couple airs and earths jumped her. But then Braxis started moving up, and what was comforting about fighting Braxis is that her acid breath, it doesn't get the bonus against squads against my elementals. They're not squad figures, they are heroes. So Braxis needed a 17 or higher to gas any of them, and that made it very unlikely that she would get to any of them. She did actually, I think she killed 1 or 2 though, which was, kind of surprising to get a roll that high and kill them, but she was not nearly as dangerous to this army as she could have been. But of course, I wanted to protect her from getting to Karak, because if she gassed him, game's over. Fortunately, the air elementals and the earth elementals, I think I had my earths up on height. They were able to do their tunnel. Braxis started moving in kind of around here. Even though Braxis was on shadow, air elementals were jumping her as well. And because she's a flying unit, they have air mastery, so they dropped her defense. Same thing with attacking Raylan. This is where the air elementals really started to impress me. Not only were they really good at stopping the small and medium figures, so like Braxis with her retinue, my air elementals could just intercept the green scales and prevent them from getting off all of their attacks. It was satisfying to see. But they were also good for dropping the defense on flying figures. So Raylan died fairly quickly, and Braxis died fairly quickly. Of course, I was losing elementals left and right, but once Zetacron was down, once Raylan and Braxis and the green scales were down, I had time to lick my wounds. He still had the ninjas of the Northern Wind, and this starts getting interesting. But with the ninjas, it took them time to move up, and during that time, I moved Karak back to safety, back from this perch down here, and I was trying to revive some elementals. And I got some hot rolls. I brought a lot of elementals back during that time when the ninjas were approaching me, and I replenished a lot of my army. At that point, I started sending out the air elementals to intercept the ninjas and keep them from engaging, because they have 4 attack and ghost walk, so they can rush right through my earth elementals and water elementals and go straight for Kurok, and I did not want that to happen. He's already wounded. The air elementals did stop them, and it caused an interesting moment in gameplay. An interesting kind of rule or question emerged, and I'll just go ahead and scroll down here to this is a shot of the end game. So the ninjas got very close to Kurok. In fact, they did engage Kurok, but because of air mastery, they were not able to. They couldn't engage Kurok that turn, or they were trapped within the vortex. This is what I remember. So I think I had water elementals that were shooting at them with range, and so they have disappearing ninja, or Kurok tried to whack them, and they have disappearing ninja. Disappearing ninja, you get a certain roll. The ninja can move away up to 4 spaces, but they have to end unadjacent to any figure. Because the ninja was caught in the vortex, there was a question. Could a ninja disappear out of the vortex? And the wording on the card was a little ambiguous. The eventual consensus, and I remember we brought a whole bunch of people, surrounded the event, and even the tournament director, he looked at it and he's like, yeah, I don't think the ninja can disappear out of swirling vortex. I think the ninja's stuck there. And so it produced this really interesting situation here. I should say, this ninja got up to Kurok and dropped him to 1 life, a single life. Agent Kara was undamaged, and there was a very critical rebirth on an air elemental that produced this situation. So 2 air elementals, here's this overlapping vortex. This ninja rolls a successful disappear. Where can the ninja go? Well, the ninja can only move 1 space while he's in the vortex, right? He could jump in the lava and kill himself, but even if he survives, he's still next to Kurok. He could go here. He's next to the Kurok and the air elemental. He could go here, next. Here, it's almost like chess. It's like a king that can't move anywhere. It's in check everywhere he goes. So at that point, it realized, the ninja cannot disappear. He cannot use his disappear. So the opponent had to. The ruling was the opponent had to forego the disappear roll and roll defense normally. I think I only rolled 1 skull. Unfortunately, my opponent blanked, and then that was declared game. But it was a really interesting moment that I had not foreseen. I did not set this up thinking that it would produce this scenario. I didn't. It just emerged, and it just had never seen it before. So anyway, great game. Kurok very nearly died. Full life, Kar, 2 elementals, and a debutif. And then here are the cards to prove it. You can see here 4 wounds on Kurok right there, and nearly all my elementals are dead. So even though the enemy, Aaron's a good guy. I enjoy playing with my opponent, my esteemed opponent. Even though my esteemed opponent lost most of his units early in the game, I would say, his ninjas, they just would not die. They kept disappearing on their way to Kurok. I was throwing everything I could at them, and they just kept killing elementals left and right. It was tough. So I was rolling hot for rebirth, but he was rolling hot for disappear, so it was beginning to cancel out. So the ninjas, they did a ton of work. They nearly swung it, but because of this weird unforeseen situation here with the disappear, it just it forced them. It kind of forced a loss there. So, but anyway, grateful for the game, Aaron, if you're watching this, and that's where the cards were at the end of the match. So the big air elemental army, the 5 air elemental army, was doing good. It was a strong showing that day, but we had 3 more games to go. So let's talk about those. Okay, and Game 2 was held on Mossflower. This is a map designed by the legendary Super Frog, who's designed amazing maps. If you are not familiar with this name, and you should be, he's got some great maps. You can go on Heroscapers and check out all the maps he's made. They're great to play on, a lot of fun, and a lot of fun to build too. This is a map I had yet to play on at the time. It's a map made up of master set and jungle terrain, and then 2 glyph spots. So let's go ahead and see the army that I was up against. And yes, this is an army I had the pleasure of playing Dylan, who is actually a Renegade Heroscape designer. So I had a chance to pick his brain about how how he designs his units and kind of the design philosophies of Renegade, and it was a real pleasure to play against him. And he brought a mean army, a really, I thought, a very efficiently designed army. So remember earlier I was talking about how I was thinking about bringing the Wormlings? Well, it's no surprise that someone else thought to bring them. So he brought 3 black Wormlings, 3 blue Wormlings, 2 red, 2 white, and to round out his 5th general, he brought the powerhouse of Cyprian and Sonia Essenwein. You can see here, it's 15 points, but still, 4 of his generals are all bonding. All of these Wormlings right here, and he filled out the rest of his points with a really powerful set of heroes. So, yeah, I was impressed by this, and not a little nervous, about this. I was pretty anxious to face this thing, specifically because if Cyprian flies in and chill touches Kurok, that's game, and Cyprian has a very good chance of doing that, in addition to all the Wormlings I had to get through. So let's go ahead and talk about the placement I made for my units here. You can see the Demutif, he's a little off-center there. I didn't catch it at the time I took that picture, so it bugs me, but oh well. He's meant to go on those 2 hexes right there. So I'll do the laser pointer, yeah, sure. So out of fear of Cyprian, this is that scenario where I did not put Kurok at the start of my start zone, or at the front of my start zone. The thinking was, I need to completely surround him, back him into a corner and completely surround him with figures, because I don't want Cyprian engaging him. It's going to take Cyprian at least 2 turns to fly in and engage Kurok. I want to be able to see Cyprian coming and protect Kurok at that time. So I put the Demutif back here. I initially thought maybe put the Demutif here. One reason I didn't is because then that means it's only 2 figures the opponent has to get through to get to Kurok. But the other reason too, Demutif standing right here, he kind of can block some of Kurok's sight. Demutif's a fairly big figure. He's got broad shoulders right there, and so it would be hard for Kurok to see out into the field at certain angles if the Demutif was right there. So I put a Demutif there. Demutif, he can take up 1 hex adjacent to Kurok, and then the rest can be elemental. So that's 3 figures the opponent would have to get through, or 3 different angles, Anyway, I just thought it'd be better to have 3 instead of 2 figures surrounding Kurok right there. And then the rest of the placement was fairly simple. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the game itself. So as you can see here, 2 glyphs were revealed, the unique attack glyph and the initiative glyph. No one went for the unique attack the entire game. Not surprising, because this is a common heavy army, and this is a common heavy army, so there really was not much incentive to go after that. But there was some competition for the initiative glyph. So Dylan played the army very, very well. He did not let me get height on him nearly ever, and he often forced me to attack up on him from below with him on height. One thing he did a good job of, I just remember this especially, his white Wormlings are the tankiest of his Wormlings. They're the only ones with 4 defense. And so this perch right here became very important, especially for him. It was easy for his Wormlings to set up here. Some of his Wormlings went here, like a black Wormling went here and did a couple of gas attacks. But a bunch of Wormlings would set up on this perch here, and they would fire into my elementals. I noticed my elementals were beginning to move they were kind of funneling toward here. Oh, we'll get to that one. But they were not really, I was not going for that initiative. I thought, that's baiting me out of a potentially good position, don't go for it. Like I said, they were funneling down this corridor here, which was great for Dylan because they were just, as soon as my elementals started approaching this perch, his Wormlings would either lightning, ice, or occasionally fledgling fire with the red elemental into my boys. Now, it was nice that the fledgling did not have its bonus because none of my guys were squad figures, they were just heroes, but still, I think it's like 6 range or 5 range, still a hefty range on the fledgling fire. So he was still able to threaten me with that. But I want to return to the white elementals, because what Dylan did that I thought was impressive was he put a white elemental right here. So not only can I only engage him, as I'm approaching him, not only can I only engage him while he's on height, but it's his tankiest Wormling on height, 5 defense, protecting all these other Wormlings right here. It was tough to get through, and I thought that's pretty impeccable placement, So eventually what I had to do, as you can see here, the Wormling there was a white Wormling here. He did eventually die, but you can see they're kind of marching down this little single file line right here. What I had to do is I did eventually send an Earth Elemental. I think one of these revived at some point, but I do remember there was a white Wormling right here and an Earth Elemental. I said, normally it's not advised to attack someone when they have hide on you, but I said, I need to find some breakthrough. I need to find some way through this defense. So I sacrificed an Earth Elemental, tried for an attack. I don't think I got it. And I did it again. I sent another Earth Elemental, tried it again. I think I did eventually crack it, but I lost a couple elementals in the process, which was frustrating. But I thought, that's okay. You can lose your elementals, because when the time comes to move Kurok, then you've got something you can revive that turn. And I also thought, too, I thought there was potentially a way to play the game a bit more psychologically, in the sense that my opponent's army cannot regenerate. I guess Cyprian can heal wounds, but it can't regenerate lost Wormlings. My army can. So I don't need to go out of my way to protect every single one of my elementals all of the time. I can let a few of them die with the knowledge that I'll just retreat and revive, and I can essentially play the clock against my opponent. The idea was force the opponent toward me, force him toward a favorable position that I have set up and away from his position. That was my thinking. And use Kurok's regeneration as a way to get the opponent, put fire under his feet. Just sort of like, I gotta move. I gotta go get that Kurok right now. That's kind of what I wanted to do. So yeah, and then you can see here I also put Agent Carr there. He was also kind of a bait. I kind of wanted the opponent to go after Carr. I put Carr next to a bush so that if anyone attacked him from range, he would get a bonus. But I also wanted to set him up here in the event I needed him for Cyprian. I thought he's going to be my anti-Cyprian. As Cyprian approaches, I'm going to leave one order marker on Agent Carr to make my opponent always a little anxious that I might activate Carr. And so force the opponent, do you deal with Carr? Do you deal with Kurok? That sort of thing. So I wanted to put him there, even though there is that height spot there. I didn't love that, but that's why it's a good map design. You go there, you get your bush bonus, but then you also expose yourself to a height attack. This is another really good placement that was really challenging for me. Dylan put his other white Wormling on the initiative glyph. So again, his toughest Wormling holding a glyph. Perfect. And that white Wormling can also shoot at Agent Carr. So I thought that was really challenging, and he held the initiative glyph for a long time in that game, so he was just winning initiative many times. I think there was one time I did win initiative despite him holding the glyph, but still, this did have an effect on the game, a pronounced effect on the game. Now, there was a moment when I needed to move up the area of influence of my elementals. It just, the 8 spaces from this little corner here just was not cutting it. So what I did, I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I put Kurok right there next to the bush. So that extends it out quite a ways. But of course, this means he's a lot closer to Cyprian, who's chilling back there. So Dylan basically opened with his Wormlings. He let Cyprian just hang back and chill. And then as soon as I put Kurok there, Cyprian flies in. And I thought, oh, no. So I rushed Kurok right back in. So that was my thinking. Put Kurok up here, have him extend his area of influence for as long as Cyprian is not activated. Then when Cyprian comes in, Kurok just immediately rushes back to safety. Nope. So that's what I did. And suffice it to say, Cyprian made it to Kurok. Cyprian was doing amazing work, especially since these elementals are kind of great snacks for Cyprian. He doesn't take Cyprian much work to kill them. They can be chilled and they can be normal attacked. So Cyprian, there were a couple turns where Cyprian was healing like 2 wounds. Cyprian was just cleansing the board of elementals. It was getting really bad. I think I got down to like Kurok and maybe 2 air elementals. It was rough. And anyway, I remember Kurok was right here or here, and I had a couple elementals nearby. Cyprian was right here, and Cyprian had the opportunity to get a chill touch on Kurok, and mercifully it failed. It did not go through, but even still, he was just chewing through all of my elementals. I did not have a lot left. That's where Carr came in. Carr rushed in. He dropped an attack on Cyprian, had 1 life left. Carr dropped an attack, and it was just enough to kill Cyprian. It was really, really dicey. Just enough to get through. Killed Cyprian, and then put the 2 wounds on Sonya for Eternal Heartbreak. And then from there, Kurok, even though Kurok did take a few hits, if I'm not mistaken, But it was just a matter of Karak could just hang back, revive a couple elementals, and then rush forward and clean up the rest of the wormlings on the map. And from there, that was game. And so here you can see the final board. All the elementals, or all of the wormlings, had been mopped up. This is where that fight between Cyprian and Karak occurred. I think Cyprian was right here, Karak was right here, and then Kar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He rushed in and whacked Cyprian with Sword of Reckoning. And then, as you can see, I have 3 air elementals remaining, and then 1 water elemental. One thing I forgot to mention why the air elementals proved surprisingly effective was because my opponent's entire army was flying. All of these units, all wormlings and all flying vampires. So air elementals dropped their defense, and I think air elementals put a decent number of wounds onto Cyprian, and that turned out to be decisive. So air elementals, the two for two games where they were really surprising me with how effective they were. They were in huge numbers. So anyway, had that chill gone through, I probably would have lost, but. Dylan, if you're watching this, it was a great game, and it was an honor to play you. So that's that. And now we'll go on to Game 3. All right, Game 3, also on a Super Frog map. This is Fatal Attraction. It's a road and master set map. It's got 2 glyph locations and the rock for the start zone. So I always like it when the designers make the start zones visually noticeable. You don't have to rely on the little dots on the printout. So yeah, I always appreciate that when it can happen. So yeah, we jumped in, and this time I played against Ella, another very good player. Played a couple games. I think I've played 1 game with him before in a prior event. Very, very good. He brought the Pirates army, which is, another army that makes a lot of sense for this format. The Pirates are also a hodgepodge of general units, and they all synergize with each other. So he's got Admiral. So yeah, this was his build. It was Admiral, Arkmer, Cornelius, Fiabani, Killian Vane, and Knaves of the Silver Scimitar. So a captain-heavy army with Admiral switching up the order markers here and there. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and I only noticed this as I was putting together this video. I didn't notice this in game, and it doesn't bother me either way. It does appear that so you have Knaves and Killian, that's Revno, that's 1 general. Fiabani, that's Einar. Cornelius, that's Utgar. Admiral, that's Vidar. And then you have Arkmer and Anshu left. And I think the rules of the event were you had to do 55 points into at least 55 points into 5 different generals. So maybe I don't know if this was cleared with the tournament director. I don't know, but it does appear that Arkmer is Ular and Anshu is Aquila. So not a big deal, but it seems like there were 2 units that did not make up a single general, for the 55 points. But again, like I said, I didn't mind it. Even if I had noticed it in the tournament, which I didn't, it would not have bugged me. It still looked like it would be an interesting game, and I think the army power levels were roughly equivalent. So I'm fine with it either way. But just in case people are looking at this build right here and notice that, I only noticed it when I had the army right in front of me as I was making this video. But anyway, so these are the unpainted versions, except for Cornelius, because he was a promo. And I think someone lent Anshu to Ella. I don't recall. But in any case, there's a painted Anshu, Cornelius right here, Arkmer, and then here are the Knaves. This guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. These 4 are the Knaves. This right here is Fiabani. Just in case it's hard to tell with the painting. And then this right here, this is a proxy for Killian Vane. Again, I have no problem with proxying. Sometimes, I guess in a more intense tournament, it would matter, because hit zones are important. But they used an Exile of the Sundered Sea to represent Killian. It's fine by me. Killian has his blunderbuss aimed outward. This Exile model has his pistol aimed outward. It's fine. Whatever. It's fine by me. So as far as I could tell, that was a proxy, but it's all the same to me. So anyway, really good army, really concerning army for all of its order marker flexibility. Let's go ahead and check out the board. So here was my placement here, and then here was Ella's placement. And as you can see here, there's a Kelda glyph right here and a unique attack glyph. So remember this glyph. This became a real thorn in my side as things went on because Ella's entire army is unique. So we started moving up. I started advancing my air elementals. I think Anshu was moved up first. Anshu went right here. I had an air elemental attack Anshu to get the defense debuff on him. I think Anshu survived surprisingly long, eventually did go down. I think a couple air elementals died as well. Then the Knaves started moving in along with their pirates, and so Admiral was always switching up order markers. Fiabani went first along with the Knaves. One of the Knaves went straight for the unique attack, which was very smart. It powered up Ella's entire army, and so I thought, I gotta get him off that. So I moved some air elementals. I put air elementals right here, and they just couldn't kill this freaking Knave. The Knave was, I think Fiabani was briefly here, so it gave the Knave a little defense buff, but Fiabani eventually moved, and like this one little Knave right here, two defense, air elementals attacking down, 4 attack, they just couldn't kill him. So for several turns of this game, Ella was really charged up on his offense. He was all of his Knaves, Fiabani, Cornelius eventually started moving in. It was really tough to fight that, and I was losing elementals fast. This was a game where I was glad I did bring, or this was an event I was glad I brought the Demutif, because, you know, of the road bonus. Demutif didn't do a whole lot in this game, but that's okay. He's Demutif. You don't need him to do a lot. I put Demutif right there, and he soaked up a couple of attacks on road, so, you know, 1 life, 5 defense. If all Demutif does in a game is just soak up a couple of attacks away from a more valuable figure, as far as I'm concerned, he's done his job, and he did his job in this game here. But the game started to get really interesting as I was really thinned out on my elementals, and Ella's units were beginning to move up. He still had a bunch of Knaves. Cornelius was moving in, and so was Admiral. Admiral was kind of stalking the background. He didn't move in right away, but Fiabani and I think Killian Vane moved up. Killian Vane was right around here. I was just, with that attack buff, I was just losing so many elementals. So I thought, I gotta do something. So I think I got down to just Kurok and my water elementals. Everything else was gone. Then the Admiral started moving up. Admiral is a unit who has 3 life and 6 defense. And this is a game where I thought, like, boy, am I glad I have something to deal with it. Boy, am I glad I have Car. So Admiral started moving up. He started doing his boarding party attack onto Kurok. Kurok was surviving, but he was taking hits. I think I moved... this tree posed a huge problem because Kurok had to see line of sight. He had to see his elementals in this direction, But Ella played pretty carefully. He moved Admiral and Cornelius. He moved him like right here. So my water elementals, I tried to move them. I even had an elemental like trying to shoot that freaking Knave off that glyph. I think that Knave on that glyph lasted longer than any of the Knaves on the front line. It was great. It was just brutal. I think eventually I did get that Knave off that glyph, but I just was bleeding left and right, and I had only my water elementals, and Kurok was just kind of struggling to find a place to position himself so he could see the entire board. It was tough. Anyway, Admiral starts moving up, and I thought, full life Admiral, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. So at that point, I decided we're moving in Car. I rushed Car in. I think my Demutif was here or something. Car was nearby, and there was a water elemental nearby, and that'll become important in a moment. But anyway, I moved Car in. Wouldn't you know it, the dude came clutch. He dropped like 5 skull attack and one-shot Admiral in 1 turn. So that was another moment where I was like, I am glad I left behind X-17 for Car. Yes, that was incredibly lucky, but it's kind of what I needed Car to do. Just like my one-time get-out-of-jail-free card against high defense figures. However, so at that point, the game did begin to even out quite a bit, but Killian Vane was still up here on height, and Cornelius Breach was still up here on height. And what I remember happening to Car shortly after, Killian Vane, he's got his blunderbuss. Car, in order to get that attack on the Admiral, I had to put Car next to an elemental, and then Killian Vane did his blunderbuss, and he killed them both, or maybe 1 or 2 turns. But Killian just really punished Car. He really got revenge for the Admiral death right there. So it came down eventually to Arkmer, a wounded Cornelius, and Killian Vane against Kurok and my water elementals. Killian Vane set up right here. Water elementals killed Cornelius pretty early right here. I do believe at one point when Fiabani died, they mutinied and they did join Cornelius, or Cornelius became the captain. But in any case, Cornelius, he did decent work, nothing too notable, but he died. And then it came down to Arkmer and Killian Vane on height, and just Kurok and my water elementals. So I started moving Kurok up. I think I moved him right. I think I kept him right there so he'd be out of range of Killian. I moved up the water elementals, and eventually they brought me the game. It was pretty close, and I think the big moment where the game swung around was the kill on Admiral right there. But Ella played it. He played it really well. And I mean, I just could not get him off that freaking glyph, and it hurt. It hurt. So anyway, Ella, if you're watching this, really appreciate you as well. It was a great game, and was a lot of fun playing against the Pirates, because the Pirates is an army I don't play against or play with very often. So any experience I can get with or against it is appreciated. So yeah, another great game, and I believe with that game it advanced me to the championship game. So the fourth game of this event would determine the winner of the event. Okay, and for the final game of this event, we return to Dark Promise by Sir Heroscape. And I was facing an army that honestly made me smile. Not in like a cute way, like, oh, little, like, wow, this is a really good army. I'm glad this army in particular is the one that made it to the final game. You know, I'm glad this army did so well. So you'll see it here. An all Master Set army. Airborne Elite, Izumi Samurai, Krav Maga, Nigaxa, and Solomon from Swarm of the Morrow. To me, this is it's really just heartening to see that 20 years into Heroscape's life, with all this new Age of Annihilation stuff, the original Rise of the Valkyrie Master Set is still kicking hard. It is the units in that Master Set are still very, very good. So he had Airborne Elite, Krav Maga, Izumi Samurai, Nigaxa. Yeah, I've read that out. But anyway, it was small wonder, just really solid units. Small wonder that this army made it to the event. But it was just nice to see an all Master Set army get this far. So yeah. Now, anyone who is familiar with the Airborne Elite, you can see what happened on the first round of the game. My opponent, Ryan, he got the drop on the Airborne Elite. He put them all, before any of us made a move, his Airborne dropped. You know why that's a problem? Because of my Kurok right here. So why did I put Kurok at the start of this, knowing that there was a possibility the Airborne could drop? Well, my thinking was this. If the Airborne drop, I'm basically screwed. There's basically no way for me to win this game if they drop. So I realized, like, this is a terrible matchup to begin with. I'm in a lot of trouble. You know, I figured my only way of winning this game was if the Airborne don't drop for several turns, I have a chance to develop like air elementals to prepare for them, and then when the Airborne drop, if I win initiative and can get the jump on them and engage them with elementals, I figured that's the only way I can win against this. And so with that in mind, I thought, even if I put Kurok all the way back in my start zone, if he drops first turn, you can just put him right there. There's nowhere Kurok is safe. There's just nowhere he's safe against the Airborne if they drop in the first turn. Well, indeed, they dropped in the first turn. And look at this. There's a unique glyph right there, so they could charge them all off with... I mean, it was scary. So when I saw that, I thought, yeah, GG, man. Yeah, GG. But I figured I'll play it anyway. So I had Kurok right there, bit the bullet. Then my opponent won initiative, and then something interesting happened. He chose not to send all of his attacks into Kurok, which mystified me, I have to say. He did put 2 height attacks onto Kurok, and that did hurt. I think Kurok took 2 or 3 wounds. It was bad. But then he had this one here, I think, shoot an elemental, and then this one here, I think, also shoot an elemental. In my mind, I thought, why didn't he go for Kurok? Why didn't he put all of his... He would have won. I mean, maybe I could have swung it around, but I thought, man, you take out Kurok, I'm in deep trouble. Anyway, he chose not to send all of his attacks into Kurok. He did kill some elementals, and he did put wounds on Kurok. So still a productive turn. But then I realized, like, I may never get this chance again. So I think the first thing I did was start moving in water elementals. I said, screw water, get them off water. We need to start shooting these guys and trying to take out as many as I can. I think I did take out 1 or 2. That's fine, right? That's fine. It's on his next turn, as long as I can drop him from 4 attacks, we're good. We're in good shape. So that's what I did. I think he had another turn on the Airborne Elite, and they killed a few more elementals. I think they put even more wounds on Kurok. Didn't kill him. And then on the next turn, I think I engaged some of them. I started sending out air elementals, and what was nice is what I like about this map for earth elementals, they can just tunnel right up here to this nice little perch. So just zoop, zoop, zoop. You know, it was easy to set up the earth elementals there, and it was easy to get the water elementals up and start firing into them. Miraculously, I killed the Airborne Elite. I killed them, and I thought, oh my word, Kurok is still alive. He's still clinging to life, and somehow I'm still in this game. Now, I took losses. Kurok was injured, and I lost a lot of elementals. I was also surprised that the opponent didn't go for that glyph, because if he had gotten that, that would have been 4 attacks of 5. How would I fight that? But he didn't, and I thought, use this opportunity while I have it. Press on, press on. The game was far from over, though. My opponent had a really good army. Game was far from over because he still had Krav Maga right there. Krav Maga could do a similar job to the Airborne Elite. If they got within 7 range of Kurok, they would finish the job. They'd finish Kurok off if they got up to him. So I figured now is the time I need to engage them with air elementals, and that's what I did. I moved my air elementals pretty far out. I don't think I moved Kurok super far out. Well, this is why you record your games, dog and days. You don't have to remember a week later. Anyway. But what I do remember is Krav Maga started clustering up here. I moved a bunch of air elementals here, which was just about as far as Kurok's aura range could go. And the air elementals were halting the Airborne Elite, and that was their purpose. They got a couple lucky attacks off and killed a couple of them. And and so at that point, the remaining bits of the game do kind of blur except for the end game. So Sonlin started moving up. I think I locked him down here on height. I had a couple of earth elementals jump down on Sonlin, smash him. I think he got a couple heals with dragon healing and a couple of swoops with dragon swoop, but not many. Eventually the earth elementals did overwhelm him. And then I took out the Krav Maga. This army was still kicking. Like, I thought, okay, well, crap, now I have to deal with the frickin' Izumi Samurai. And then it was at that moment I realized I don't have a single special attacker. The Izumi can counter-strike into all of my figures if they're attacking on melee. And I had lost a lot of my water elementals in the charge against the Airborne Elite. So I thought, how am I going to fight the Izumi? Well, Ryan started moving his Izumi and he put them in shadow. So now counter-strike with 6 attack. It was getting really, really dicey. I think at that moment I realized I need to start bringing back my water elementals so I can start shooting at the Izumi from range. I had a couple of air elementals left. I think I spent a couple turns trying to revive some water elementals. Not very successful. I think I got 1 maybe that brought back. Somehow I survived the Izumi. Somehow I got through them, and somehow I brought it down to basically just Nigaxa. Now I forgot to mention that Nigaxa was gradually moving in this direction. I think he had grabbed that glyph right there. Nigaxa is nothing to smirk at too, because I still had Kar and I still had Kurok. If he shackled Kar, I mean, if he got lucky and shackled Kar, I'd probably lose right then and there. So I was down to just a couple of elementals, Kurok, Kar, and a Demutif. And I remember I think I sent the Demutif out to deal with Nigaxa. But anyway, Nigaxa was approaching here, and I had a couple of air elementals, right? I just swarmed Nigaxa with all the elementals I had, just like protect him at all, keep Nigaxa from engaging my uniques at all costs. Nigaxa just tanked, and he took wounds, but he still held his ground, and he was killing lots of elementals. Eventually, he got to a point where I think there was 1 air elemental right here, and Nigaxa was right here. Nigaxa was down to 1 life, and I think I only had like 1 or 2 elementals, a severely wounded Kurok, and a full life Kar. My opponent looked at me, and he said, "What do you think?" He asked me, and I appreciate his confidence in my decision making, or his faith that I would not lead him astray. Looking at the scenario, I thought, well, he's on his last figure with 1 life. He's only engaged with 1 figure right here. There is a path to victory. It is exceedingly slim, but let's say so air elemental's right here, Nigaxa's right here. If Nigaxa disengaged from that air elemental and didn't take the wound, and got to Agent Kar and then shackled Kar, he could very well still win the game. So I told him, at this stage, man, I say go for it. And he agreed. And to his credit, he agreed, and he did it. And unfortunately, Nigaxa did not make it. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, interesting. I think Nigaxa... Oh, I forget what I was saying. There was 1 Izumi Samurai left, but I do remember Nigaxa making this move right here. And if Ryan is watching this, I'm sure he'll attest to it. Nigaxa rushed out from that air elemental, tried to go for Agent Carr, died on the disengage, and so that was the end of Nigoxa. And then it was just my wounded Kurok. My Diminutive was still alive. Look at that. 2 elementals, and then Agent Carr. I sent Agent Carr specifically to get through that high defense, and I forget who did the final blow, but that was it. That was enough to kill. And an amazing game, but I do remember telling Ryan, in a spirit of charity, and I hope he can understand me sharing this with him at the end of the game. But I told him, if now that the game's over, I was very surprised that, you only attacked me with 2 air elementals, 2 airborne elite. I was surprised you only did that. I was surprised you didn't go for that glyph, because I told him, and he gave a reason for why he didn't. I think he said he wanted to thin out my elementals, and, fair enough. But I told him, I think Kurok was too important for you to kill in that game. If you had done that, I would have been so crippled for the rest of the game. So anyway, Ryan, great player. I had a great time playing you, and it was an intense game, and I was scared. The fact you got that drop that early, I've been there. I've been on the receiving end and on the firing end. On the end where I'm playing the airborne, where they get a drop like that, and it's pretty decisive. So anyway, with that, the final score, I got, wouldn't you know it, 4-0 win-loss. So here were the other armies that day. So actually, because the way the Swiss rankings worked, Dylan's army ended up doing very well against the, I think because he faced this army and this army went 4-0, he got bumped up in the rankings. But he ended up surpassing Ryan's army here for second place, I think just due to the matchup strength he went up against. But Ryan still took top 3, still came in third place here with a very good army. Dylan had a very good army, and of course I had a very good army. Yes, no, I tease, but it's interesting to note that this army is an army I kind of ran into by accident. I only ran this army because my friend Alex could not print 3D print elementals for me, and so I had to go with something else. So I guess in a way I owe Alex a thank you. So Alex, thank you for indirectly pointing me toward an army that did very well this day. So great day. Brandon from Card Addiction, if you're watching this, thank you for all the labor you put into the event. I had a great time, and of course everyone at these events. I'm sure people have noticed this, but when you go to Heroscape tournaments, everyone is gentlemanly and sportsmanlike, and it's just a good atmosphere, good vibes. It's why you go to these events. It's a great community. So anyway, great performance for an army I did not expect to run. But now we get to have some fun. Get to talk about some of the things I learned playing this army and playing against some of the other armies. So these are sort of the takeaways in the spirit of that one tournament video I did a while back. So the 5x, the biggest takeaway, the 5 times air elementals was surprisingly effective. It was good at the usual role of intercepting small and medium. So in the end, 5 of those, 5 vortexes out on the map was very strong protection for Kurok. I was worried about how am I going to protect Kurok? Well, you protected with 5 air elementals. You protected with a wall of tornadoes. That's how you do it. So that they predictably did very well in that role, which they're famed for. They were also surprisingly good dropping target defense on flying units, and there were a lot of flying units: Braxis, Evil Raylin, Wormlings, and Cyprian and Sonia. So they did plenty, and even Anshu later on did plenty of work into that. That was important, Then they were important as being the most mobile unit in my army. They have 5 move with stealth flight, and it made it very easy to throw them out far into the map to halt approaching enemies. I do remember that being an important thing I was thinking about. Like, my water elementals only 4 move walking. Earth elementals, they have the underground tunnel, but they can only move 4 spaces. The air elementals can ignore elevation and move 5 spaces. So they were my most mobile, and it was easiest to send. It was the easiest to send them furthest out onto the map, which was handy because we had 5 of them. So it really was easy to spread out the area, the hexes on the board that were being affected by Vortex. So that was really great. Next takeaway, more elementals in general did seem preferable to additional heroes to support them. So remember I was thinking about bringing, I say heroes here, Nikitas, additional support units. if I had brought Raylin and Awashia, my elementals would have been a lot less expendable. More bodies for the opponent to chew through to get to Kurok. And that was the thing, I was thinking of bringing these heroes along for the express purpose of protecting Kurok or buffing elementals, but just having more elementals, period, it was more order marker efficient, and they still did the job of protecting Kurok just fine. So anyway, I was glad that I, instead of going with 9 elementals, I think I went with, 11? Yeah, so it was... Wait, was that 11? 5, 4, 3, 12. Yeah, so no, it was better to have 12 elementals than less elementals and more heroes to support. Agent Carr was absolutely the right call over X-17, as I hope I've shown, especially in that Admiral game where I was facing the Admiral. I mean, he could have wreaked havoc. Admiral could have won the game right there if I didn't have a can opener like Carr to get through. Offense was critical, and the other thing, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but in reflection, X-17's Cyberclaw, which was the main reason I was thinking of drafting him, it would have kind of been redundant alongside Air Elementals. The other thing, too, I was initially thinking of X-17 because I was afraid of Halucia, but as we learned, Halucia was not going to be allowed at this tournament, not yet anyway, right? And so the main unit I was afraid of and thinking of drafting X-17 for wouldn't have even shown up. So Agent Carr was definitely the right call in this. And then finally, just the reminder, it goes without saying, but long range is still this army's Achilles heel. So Airborne Elite, Krav Maga, Zetacrons of Zetacron, first game, and then Airborne Elite and Krav Maga. Even though I won that game, I still think had my opponent played his Airborne Elite differently, he could have easily sweeped me. Kurok Elementals alone, they can do little against it. They need some kind of separate anti-range support. And honestly, even though this army came first place that day, technically I didn't have any answers to long-range matchups. I didn't have any. I was just lucky on some of that most of my matchups did not have long range. That's part of why I did well that day. And it's tough when Kurok is a lot of fun, but if your opponent has long range, they can kill him easily, especially Airborne Elite. Airborne Elite are like antimatter to Kurok and the Elementals. So anyway, those are my big takeaways. Those are the things I learned. I'm sure there are other things, but those are the things that sprang to mind. And anyway, folks, here we go. We're at the final slide, and I would be very curious what you guys think of this type of video. I've been talking for a very long time, but hopefully it was informative, enjoyable, and hopefully you like the visual aids. I know it's not quite a full-on battle report where we're watching the game live, but hopefully it's interesting to listen to someone who has images of his game going back in his memory and reflecting on a game. Hopefully that's a meaningful content all the same. So these are not my games. These are a couple other ones, a couple other pictures that were provided to the group. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Do let me know if you like this type of video, and I can easily do these for other tournaments that I attend in 2025 and onward. Anyway, it's been a pleasure having you guys as always. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and as always, escape on.